Alright, we were talking about Terra in the last segment, but before I continue, I'm going to mention our textbook one more time. It's called The Scroll of Biblical Chronology and Prophecy, and it's available at World Wide Web, torahtimes.org. You can focus up here. Alright, there are other books on the website. Okay. We were talking about Terah had three sons, Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Now we know from the example of Noah and his three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, that we can't assume which one is the oldest or which one is born first without other information. We know in the case of Noah, though Shem was listed first, he's listed first because he's most important, and however, he was born second, Japheth being older and Ham being younger. So really this means is all we know is that his firstborn of Terah was born when he was 70 years old. Now we're told in another passage that Haran died in the land of his birth. So that kind of clues us in that Haran was the eldest child. So to find the information that we need, let's scroll down here. Terah lived 205 years. Okay, we know several things. Terah and Abraham set out together from Ur of the Chaldees, but they stopped in Haran, the town of Haran, and did not continue their journey, or Abram did not continue his journey until his father died, and he continued his journey at age 75. So this is our key link here. When Terah died at 205, Abraham was 75. Also, we have a passage in the book of Acts. It says there in Acts 7:4, then he left the country of the Chaldeans and settled in Haran. After his father died, God had him move from there to this country, in which you are now living. So what this is saying is that first his father died at age 205, and then at age 75, Abraham left Haran and went to Canaan to complete the journey. So here, this is the key link in the chronology. Now, this is a case where the Christian chronologers have correctly computed the chronology, starting with Bishop Ussher, and the rabbis of Error. They actually have Abraham being born when Terah was 70. Not realizing the implications of the example with Noah and his son, and that Abraham would have waited until his father died before leaving Haran. So the chronology, there's a 60-year difference in the chronology, and we'll see that at another point later, we'll see that the rabbis are right and the Christian chronologers are wrong. So it's not all one side or the other. Some parts are right with Christians got it right, and some parts the rabbis have it right and the others have it wrong. What happens is there's a 60-year difference in the chronology depending on whether you go with the Christians or the rabbis. But it's evident from the book of Acts and the way the scripture states the way he left Haran, and then his father died, that his father had died first. And we'll find that this is confirmed by the sabbatical periods that come out later. They don't actually work with the rabbinic version of this chronology. They desynchronize. Okay, so now we will roll forward here a little bit. Okay, Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born. This is the next link in the chronology here. So we have Isaac's first year, or what we call his 0th year, where his age is counted in months, when Abraham is 100 years old. And then over here I have Sarah being 90 years old in this column over here. Okay, now if we read in Genesis, we can get a link to the Exodus here from Isaac. It says in Genesis 15:13, and he said unto Abram, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs. And shall serve them, and they shall afflict them. That part's parenthetical. 400 years. Okay, the key phrase here is thy seed. Okay, the text is speaking directly of Isaac, Abraham's seed, saying they shall be a stranger in a strange land, or a land that is not theirs. That meaning Isaac and Abraham's descendants from then on. So the 400 years actually starts counting with the birth of Isaac. Okay, and this is a case where the rabbis are correct. This is exactly how Seder Olam interprets it. So if we follow this column down 400 years, we end up with the Exodus. Here's the 400th year, and here's the Exodus. Now why do the 400 years from the birth of Isaac? Well, it is an urban legend, more or less, that Israel spent 400 years in Egypt. This is actually not the case. And we can prove it because the prophecy says, in Genesis 15, it says they will come out in the 4th generation. All right? Well, the generation that went down to Egypt was Jacob. Okay, Jacob was the first generation to go down. His father Isaac stayed in the land of Canaan and did not go down to Egypt. So Jacob's the first generation. Then Jacob's son Levi is the second generation. Now Levi had a daughter named Jochebed, who was the mother of Moses, and this is the 3rd generation. Okay, and Moses is the 4th generation. Okay, we're also given the ages of Jacob, Levi, and Amram, and also Moses. And they're all in the order of 120, 133 years. Okay, there is no way to tie all of these together to make it last for 400 years in Egypt. That's just not going to happen. So they were actually in Egypt for 210 years, which also agrees with the rabbinic chronology. It's the only way to figure out the chronology without creating a contradiction. Now, I want to go up here and go back to our Joseph lesson here. If we start, actually that's a little premature. We need to cover some in-between chronology here. Okay, we just did Isaac. Now Isaac was 60 years old when his son Jacob was born. Actually, they were twins, Jacob and Esau. And this is the first year or the first 12 months of Jacob's life right here. Okay, so Jacob's life is the green column. Now, we're given the total number of years that Jacob lived. Jacob lived to 147 years. So if you come down here, here's the 147th year of Jacob right here. Okay, and we're told in Genesis 47:28, and Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So the whole of the age of Jacob was 147 years. So if we synchronize the 17th year in Egypt with his 147th year of age, we count backwards, then we find out that Jacob went to Egypt when he was 130. Okay, and we have 2 texts that tell us exactly where in the cycle of the famine years that they did come when he came to Egypt. Genesis 45:6. For these 2 years hath the famine been in the land, and yet there are 5 years in which there shall be neither earing nor harvest. Okay, this is to say that we're exactly between the 2nd year of famine and the 3rd year of famine, because there'll be 5 more, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 2 were already passed. So Jacob came in the 3rd year of famine. Okay, what this does for us is it blocks the years of famine in relation to the rest of the chronology. Okay, and as we discussed before, the 7 years of plenty end with the sabbatical year, or the 7th year, and the 7 years of famine end with the sabbatical year. So if we go back and we use all the chronology that I've described before, then we'll see that counting from creation, the 7-year cycle does indeed align with the 7 years of plenty and the 7 years of famine. And also, if we count seven sabbatical periods 7 times, and then the following year is a jubilee, so that we mark in the jubilees, or the 50th year after the 49th year. Then we'll find that the jubilee also synchronizes with when Joseph returned the land to the Egyptians. Okay, so here we get a prototypical sabbatical and jubilee cycle. Now, the Torah was given under Moses, but many of the institutions in Torah were established orally or taught orally before Moses, before it was officially written down. And we have clues of this. For instance, God set apart the seventh day and made it holy in Genesis 2. That's not a direct commandment, but it's an implication that he wanted them to rest after his example. With Noah, it's mentioned clean and unclean animals. So possibly they were taught the distinction between clean and unclean, even though there isn't anything formally written on that. There's just like a passing reference. Okay? And also during Noah's flood, we have the mention of a 7-day cycle, that Noah waited 7 days several times. That gives us an indication that he was following the 7-day pattern or cycle. So we shouldn't assume that because it's written down in Torah that that's when these institutions actually began. It could be that they began quite some time before that, even going all the way back to creation. We can't just conclude that Torah didn't exist before Moses. It would be a misnomer to call these institutions quote the quote Mosaic law, which is not even a biblical phrase. One of the only places that is used, or anything close to it is used, is in the book of Malachi, where it says, "Remember the law, the Torah of Moses, my servant." Okay, so the sabbatical years from creation synchronize with the 7 years of famine and the 7 years of plenty, and also the Jubilee cycle synchronizes with that. Okay, now let's roll our way down to the Exodus here. 400 years from the birth of Isaac. Okay, now this is the Exodus year here. Now, to get from the Exodus to the entry into the land of Israel, we have to go 40 years. And this is the, it's the yellow column here. Right here, it's 40 years. Okay, so here's the 40th year. Now, if we look over here in this column, we see this red year, which is the 49th, which would be the sabbatical cycle from the creation. And then we see here, this is the 50th year. This would be the Jubilee cycle from creation. Now, they conquered the Transjordan in the fall of the year. Okay, and then in the spring of the year, they crossed the Jordan and began the conquest of the land proper. So their first full year in the land would have been this Jubilee year from creation. Okay, but they were actually at war, and they didn't plant any crops, okay, or anything. So they didn't actually keep it as a Jubilee, although they would have if they'd been settled at that time. This is when the actual counting of cycles begins, though. Year 1 in the land, the first complete year. Okay, so we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, and this is the first sabbatical year, and also when the land division occurred would be in this year. We count down here 7 sabbatical cycles, and we get to the first Jubilee in the year. This would be during the judgeship of Othniel here, okay, who judged Israel for 40 years. So the first Jubilee would land in here. What I'm showing you is that, we back up here, is that the Jubilees from creation synchronize the counting beginning when they entered the land, and they synchronize with Joseph's 7 years of plenty and his 7 years of famine here. Okay, here's the 7th year of plenty, 7th year of famine, and here's the Jubilee. And if we can roll all the way back to creation, and the counting starts from 1.